Okay, so welcome everyone to our session today on feet. We're going to be going through a little bit about feet, meaning of feet, and to give you a brief introduction to some of the information that can be expressed by the feet, and also some of the spiritual connections with the feet. We will be taking a look at a couple of examples and things that as therapists that we might be taking a look at that start to tell us a little bit about what is actually happening for a person when we see certain characteristics present from a psychosomatic perspective. Obviously, Psychosomatic Conversations are our monthly sessions. We have different topics each session, and it's being hosted by Sean, Christy, and myself. So looking forward to working with you guys today. And Christy, Sean, welcome as well. Would you like to say anything before we start this topic?
Oh, just hi.
Sure. Hello. Yes. Welcome. And thank you for showing up today. It's always nice to see faces on a Zoom call. So thank you for coming.
Okay, so the video that is being recorded today will be shared with other participants. So if you do want to take yourself off, please take yourself off. But otherwise, you'll just be in the background whilst our PowerPoint's on and whilst we're having discussions. Okay. So Christy, would you like to start with feet or would you like the PowerPoint?
Well, I can start and then we'll pull up the PowerPoint. Just a little bit about feet. I think the most fascinating thing about our feet is how much we ignore them until they hurt. And then they have a great amount of attention. And part of the reason for this class is to bring attention to what moves us around on the planet every single day. And our feet hold the patterns of our experience in life. Our feet hold the patterns of how we have processed up to this point. And what we've either processed and or only are still holding, our feet will tell the story of us. And it's different than the face. The face, we can almost create a mask. Our feet, usually not, because they hold the story, because no one really sees them. And I believe the more awareness we can bring to all parts of us, the better we can navigate and literally be embodied, because we're noticing all parts of ourselves in a situation, in a thought process, bringing the body mind together instead of allowing the mind to just continue to ruminate. We're actually slowing down, noticing our patterns that we're doing in the feet. It's one of the things I use all the time in my practice is, what are your feet doing? How can you notice what your response is to either the internal dialogue or what the outside world is bringing to us? What's our reaction? Because it shows up in the feet. So there's lots of information in our feet. And the more that we can bring awareness to our patterns, the easier it is to shift our patterns. So that would be my introduction to feet.
The interesting thing as well, the personality of the person does show up individually. Like we kind of think that the face is going to be the part that speaks the most about our personality, but the feet themselves have their own mirror of the personality. In the same way that the body is overlaid in the face, we also see that in the feet. And sometimes when people are learning feet reading, it's really, really challenging not to actually take a look at someone's face and read it in the face first, what you're noticing, and then go down to the feet and go, oh yeah, I'm seeing this. So sometimes in some of the practice sessions that we'll do with students after they've learned feet is to actually not show them the person's face so that they get used to reading what is the personality of these feet and how does the client relate to their personal journey. How does their emotional condition show up on the feet? So it's not just the personality, it's also the emotional conditioning.
Yeah, how somebody resides in their space, in this place, at this time on Earth. Yeah, their anchor points, their ability to enable life in and out.
And we talk about the experiences being imprinted on your feet. So we can also take a look at the feet and see an area of what is current versus what is an imprint of something from your history. So the tonality of the actual tissue, even things from how you stand, they will all give us information in regard to what is actually occurring in your life. Christy.
So we have what's called the language of your feet, which is the communication of your feet. So this soul connection to the earth gives us sensations of support and or not, grounding, drive, purpose, and direction. Our feet, as you become more aware of them and how you're standing, what they feel like, what's the feeling of your feet, literally. And as you begin to understand that, and Cynthia, you started in the beginning about how much your feet has changed. As we bring awareness to our feet, that's when they can begin to shift. Because all of these things like grounding, drive, purpose, and direction are all held in the feet.
Yeah, and they come very much into even like the walking patterns, how you notice where people lead from. Do they lead from the ball of their foot, or do they lead from their hip and go heel, slam, toe, which ricochets through the knees? So every part of the foot, not only in terms of its positioning, gives us the sensation of how supported do we feel from the earth and how supported do we feel from our communities. So if someone is not feeling supported, some of those patterns, fight, flight responses are going to show up with that level of support, which therefore affects that direction and also purpose. Sean, you want to add anything?
No, you're saying it all perfectly. All perfectly.
This one's yours.
Great. So, as beings, we come down into this life. We're born into these bodies, and our sensory awareness of our environment is what our feet are mainly doing. So when we look at the body, we can see that the head is the fruit of the tree. The torso is the trunk. The arms are the branches. And the legs are the roots. And when we say roots, it's the ability to access what life offers us, what's available to us, and also our ability to reach out for what our needs are. We are souls having a physical experience here on Earth. And it's about coming down to Earth to offer who I am and to experience how all others live life. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. And you'll notice in this slide as well, we talk about the soul connection via the sole of the feet. So that trusting in something higher than yourself, bigger than yourself, also creates a level of safety within the body. So if you're not connected to that feeling of, I have a rightful birthplace, along with every other person on this planet, I have a rightful birthplace to be there. If there isn't trust in that, we're going to see that affected in the roots, basically the legs, which again is part of that fight or flight response. And we often don't think about the soul connection and having an experience in the human form in order to navigate some challenges that we come into to actually experience. Christy, you want to add to that?
No, not yet. We'll add as we go. So as we look here, the feet hold the spine, in that all of the reflex points on the feet are mirrored in the spine of our amazing, intelligent bodies. As you can see here, the lower lumbar is in the inner part of the heel. Going up, the digestive system is in the center of the foot, as you can see with the green and yellow. And then we move up into the heart, which is the thoracic, and the neck up at the toe. So the wonderful thing about this picture is when someone's having pain in the body, you can look at the foot and ask, okay, where is that in the foot? And actually work on that part of the foot to help release some tension in the part of the body. Those are the reflex points on one part of the foot that will go up. So say you're having neck pain or headache, you can actually work around the toe and work all of the padding in the toe to relieve tension in the neck.
So as we're looking at the tops of our feet, we're actually looking at our past, we're looking at our history, and we're also taking a look at our emotional response to our history. So where you see feet that have tissue that's close to the bone, there can be an avoidance of some of the emotional history, a slight bypass to wanting to be present for those emotions. And we quite often see that with people that make a decision that the past is the past and the future is the future. And I didn't particularly enjoy my past, so I'm going to just, close the door to that chapter and open up a new chapter. And sometimes in doing that, we park the emotions that haven't really been processed from the past. We park them somewhere in the body and just literally wait until such time as our body shows us a sign, goes, hey, are we ready to process this yet? And if the answer to that is no, then it stays parked in the body. And usually it will be events around being triggered that will show the need to look at some of the past emotions that have been stored, whilst at the same time the person has learnt different coping skills and resources to when they were younger. So the feedback from the feet can be very important to sort of say, well, what was your response to the past and how does that actually present? Sean, do you want to tell us the difference between the right and the left?
Yes, certainly. So the right foot relates to what we call the masculine side of our body. So that masculine side of our body is also the task, what I call the task master. It's the part of us that reaches out into the world to achieve what we have set our sights on or what we're dealing with. And the left-hand side relates to the female side, the internal, the true self. So the myself. And that left-hand side is your internal world as much as the right-hand side is your external world. And we need to notice the balance between the two, because that's where reality resides, is the balance between those two places. So it's how we occupy both sides simultaneously, and the congruency between who I am myself and how I am in the world.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Christy.
The bottoms of our feet.
Such cute feet.
Those are cute feet. The baby feet. So the bottoms of our feet, Linda had said the tops represent the past, the bottoms represent present time and what's happening. And so when we're looking at feet and you look at your own feet, for example, to notice what that is. Do you have, sometimes people can get warts on their feet. Sometimes there's a lot of tension in the foot, or tension can look like a lot of lines in the feet. And that tends to be worry in the feet. It shows up on the bottom. And we can see here in a lot of feet that I see quite a bit of dryness and cracked and bleeding skin on the heel. So when we're looking at the bottoms of feet, we're looking at, okay, what's happening internally in us and or the person that might be irritating, might be frustrating. It shows some of the blocks that we tend to run into that we might not be aware of. And that's where psychosomatics is so beautiful, because our brains like to think that we are in control and we know what's happening. And that's true to a degree, but how we're processing that over a long period of time really shows up in the patterns of the bottoms of the feet. Some people will have calluses on the insides of the big toe or around the ball of the foot. So as you look at your feet, those watching and the people here today, what do you notice about your foot, the bottom of the foot? That's what I would ask you to check, because that's the only way we can begin to look at the patterns of how you move through the world emotionally.
It's a sensory pad, and that sensory pad gives us traction in the world.
And even as you say that, Sean, sort of thinking about shoes and some of our connection these days with a style of shoe that has no flex, that gives us more of a limitation in feeling supported. And we need to accommodate our whole body work when the foot doesn't flex, because we actually do lose those sensations.
Yeah.
Okay, so the functions of the feet. It's always really interesting just to consider the functions of the feet. So I just want to ask you, just take the time to consider, what are some of the things that you would consider to be the functions of the feet? If you feel like sharing, you're more than welcome to just take some time to consider all of those things that are functions.
What do those lumps of flesh do on the ends of your ankles?
And the importance with this, sometimes people don't really have the ability to separate. So when they take their energy or their thoughts to their feet, some people have very limited awareness of what their feet are actually doing. They walk, they take them through life, but the actual physical sensation of the feet, we can sometimes lose over a period of time. Some conditions make that even more challenging to feel the feet. So also just invite you to feel into your own feet as you become aware of, what are some of the functions? And do we want to go through those, Sean and Christy, or do we just put them on?
Just put them on, I think.
Yeah, let's. So here we have, as we go through, some of them as support. They support our body. They support our weight. We're standing up, walking on them. Balance and stability. So if you've ever had a twisted ankle or a broken foot, that does change that. And when we're looking at balance and stability, do you have equal weight on all of your foot? And that's what we're looking at too, is balance on all parts of the foot versus just on the heel, where sometimes people can get the really dry heel, or I also see it on the ball of the foot. So where is that balance or imbalance? Posture and alignment. So as the foot is aligned, the posture actually is better. Sometimes a tendency can be one or the other of weight on the toes or weight on the heel. And I would suggest, when we finish the call, or you can do it now when you stand up, where do you notice most of the weight on your feet? because that does affect your posture and alignment. And arch support. What is your arch like? Some people have a very flat arch or no arch, really high arch, a fallen arch. What is that for you in your foot? And detoxification is also here. So it can collect toxins in the body. It can show up as athlete's foot. It can show up as fungus.
Out.
Gout is a collection of toxins, and working on the feet and coming at that from a different angle to notice what's creating that is where the detoxification can happen. We need to look at what's causing the toxic buildup in the feet.
And it usually will show when there are some major issues with, the feet starting to smell, and everyone else is starting to notice the detoxification process that's occurring in the feet. What we are then looking at is the feet are only one of the detoxification methods. So we're looking at the major detoxification through the breath, through the urine, through defecation. We're looking at those centers as being the detoxification. So when things are coming out through the feet, we're looking at our other body systems may also already be at full capacity, that they're struggling to detoxify. So we start to see things coming through the skin and more so through the feet. And, just coming back to what Christy was saying in regard to the arch of the support, this arch support, we're also, again, going back to taking a look at the spine represented in this area. So we're going to be looking at what kind of support that you may have had or may have felt that you needed or maybe didn't have.
And your response to that.
And your response.
Because that's what makes us individual, is our response to life. And that's why we look at them for the movement. How do they absorb shock? How do we relate to shock? Well, there must be a lot of movement. We have that in there twice. Propulsion and spring. So the spring is the ability to bounce. That, to give ourselves air, is also to give ourselves freedom and liberty. So it's not all about keeping our feet completely all the time on the ground, but we need to be able to bounce, to have freedom between one place to the next place and still feel supported and be the director of what's going on. So the sensory perception of what's occurring through and in our feet. Because just as our hands connect with touch, so do our feet. Our feet and our hands have direct access for information feedback that goes straight to our brains. So the sensory awareness underneath our feet and the comfort of our feet also affects our ability to be able to manage that sensory awareness and interact with that sensory awareness. And that's where we come to temperature. Some people often, the extremities may have minimized sensory awareness. And that's been a childhood withdrawal experience rather than the sensation of it's comfortable to stay connected in life. So we're looking at the circulation. I love that. Get your feet wet. Jump right in.
So as we take a look at the feet talk, we're looking at a number of different ways in which we actually have language that comes directly through the feet. And we hear sometimes where people are at, and we have an image potentially of what their feet might even start to look like. Like I'm feeling stuck, as an example. So some of these ones, they need to find their feet. And as we say, feet are about the direction of life. So we're looking at things like foot point to give us a congruency of what we are hearing a person say versus what their body is actually doing. So quite often when people say that they're stuck or they're needing to find their purpose, or they feel misaligned to their purpose, we might notice that their feet aren't straight. Yeah, get your feet wet, jump right in. I'm back on my feet. I'm well again. I'm feeling connected again, connected not only to my body, but connected to my fellow people in this planet.
My life.
Yeah. Christy, you want to do the next ones?
Yeah. So as we come down, and yes, this is where somatics really comes in. Have you stepped on anyone's toes? Have you annoyed someone? Is there an activation in your system? This is the best place to begin. When you begin to notice an activation, what are your little toes doing? So our toes can tell us a lot about how we're responding. So as you begin to notice your feet through the next week, when you get upset or anxious or even just a little nervous, what are your toes doing? Are they clenching? Are they coming up? Like sometimes people raise their toes up when there's that feeling. So our feet are constantly giving us feedback about what's happening in our heads and what's happening internally and how we're responding to an inside stimulus or an outer stimulus. And the languaging, like Linda said here, I have itchy feet, I need to travel. They got cold feet and said, no, we're using the language of the feet all the time in communicating where we're at, because the feet understand where we are at, literally. And it's a matter of us beginning to pay attention to what they're saying and communicating to us. I need to find my feet. I need to feel supported by me. And that one, again, I need to feel supported by me. What happens is we tend to do most of that processing in the head and we forget the body. So as an activation comes up, how we really begin to feel supported is, can I feel my feet? Can I feel the earth, which holds us each and every day? Can I literally feel the earth beneath my feet? Am I supported by the earth? The answer is yes, in case you're wondering. Always. Because we get up, we put our feet on the floor. Can we feel, and I like to language as being held by the Mother Earth. We call her Mother Earth, and that is a connection back to nature as we allow the holding and to feel supported. That's a very literal thing. It's not just intellectual.
The gravity of the experience of being human.
Yes.
Say that again.
We see things like as well with that support. We're not just looking at the feet. Of course, we're looking at the body. So we need to take a look at the next major joint up, which is also the knees. So again, for someone that might be operating outside of themselves, we might notice that their knees are locked and their body's forward. So they're not going to feel the same level of support and connection to their own body as if they're in their own alignment.
What, Linda?
What?
So as we talked about earlier, the right and the left, what you're seeing on this picture, the 3 gray dots are the grounded, balanced positions of connectedness of the feet to the earth. The yin and the yang is the soul, the self, the inner soul. It's the connection within the center of the foot that is where we emanate into life. So we know that that right foot puts us right out into the world. How do we drive through that? Can we drive through that? Do we understand and are willing to drive through that? And the left-hand side is who we are as we take ourselves there. Part of me is leading, part of me is caring, part of me is protecting, part of me is drawing me towards what is next in my life. And that passion comes from within who I am. And that's the left-hand side. That's the left foot. So we need to notice, where are these feet going? If they're directing me, where are they taking me? Are they balanced hip width? Are they smaller than the hips? Are they wider than the hips? Am I finding natural balance, or are there compensations that are occurring through that? Just the stability of stance.
Nicely said. Okay, so already we've said that the back of the feet represents the history. And you're noticing that there's a little bit of minimalistic tissue close to where the toes are and going into the toes. But the most relevant thing is as well is these really beautiful long toes. And as we're taking a look, we're looking at also representing the mind and the outreach of the mind. So immediately looking at these feet, we can see a great deal of sensitivity in this feet, a sensitivity on how supported this person feels, and also that creative nature of their mind and how they may experience connections with others. And sometimes with this style of foot, that can be a challenge that they need to learn how to navigate, how to feel safe in their body. So this gives us information as to how we'd be able to help a person who may struggle sometimes feeling connected with others, but connected to themselves.
And one other thing to notice with these feet, a little piece, is we see the long toes, and we see on the little toe, it's a little more bulbous. So each toe in psychosomatics indicates a specific thing. And the baby toe, just an example here, represents what's called the social toe. So as we're looking at these toes, what we might notice is there may be a little bit of angst around social experience, either internally or externally. And we see that in the baby toe. And as we're looking too, it's Linda had talked about the mind and the tendency and sensitivity is there. And the amazing thing about the feet is for this one to bring awareness to the feet. What are they doing? And can she begin to actually feel the soles of her feet on the earth, on the ground, to bring awareness into the body and all the way down into the roots, into the feet, to help her feel more supported by her.
Yeah, another part that we notice about this is that you'll notice the knuckles of the toes and also the tendons that run into the toes where those knuckles are. So when there are overdeveloped knuckles in these circumstances, that's also showing us pause points in how the mind activates itself. Yeah, a deliberation point before it moves through to the next step. So we're seeing a lot of rumination that goes on. It's all about how much room is there for me? How am I including myself in this room called life? Yeah. Because the knuckles are looking for room, yet they're ruminating.
And where this becomes like really important for a session is if someone was coming for a challenge with a current relationship, there are going to be other parts also within this person's body that will give us an indication that the current issue that she may have, be happening for her, also has a past theme. So the psychosomatic's ability to get to core issues and really address some of that feeling of early connection and creating tools, providing tools for that, sense of coming back into the body, sense of grounding connection, that's going to be some of the things that will make a difference. So it's not just recognizing what's out of balance, and what to next for that person.
So here's an example of the soles of the feet as we can see these feet. We're noticing, you can see a few lines in the feet, can notice at the top of the toes, a little more roughness on, looks like the left toe. So I'm flipping my brain here. The left toe has a little more irritation. And we can also see when this person is standing is the ankle, the arches are coming in, they're falling in. And there's issues with the ankles too, especially on that right foot, a little bit lack of stability, because you can see how the leg comes up and literally is going out more so than the left. But yet the arch is still coming in. And we can see standing there on the bottoms of the feet, some dryness around the heels. We have a couple places of dryness that we're looking at. Is on the heels and on the top of the toe. The big toe represents the mind and the thinking. So he may tend to overthink, is that pattern.
So
Right.
the backs of the heels and as we see a curve that's there, what we're looking for healthy stability or something that resembles natural stability is looking at the alignment of those ankles in conjunction to the heels. When there's a bow in something like that, then there's also an overstretching. Yes, rather than coming upright into the circumstances or situations. So we're looking at the weight bearing that's happening here. There's a lot of pushing down that's going on. And you'll notice that when we look at the left side photo, the width of the foot in the center compared to the heel looks so tiny in comparison to the rest of the foot. So this person feels as if they're only allowed a certain amount of room or space, but within the rest of their body, they want to occupy more room and space, but find it difficult to do so. And that's when we come back to the ankles again, and it shows us about how they grew up and their history and some of the challenges around the guidance that was around them at the time. Yeah, possibly very unencouraging environment.
And it's really important to notice the different feet shapes and face shapes within a family. So this one has a heightened sensitivity and the heightened ability to feel. If they had a sibling that's a little bit more chunkier and a larger foot, that sibling would experience the same environment very differently, which comes back to the original comment that Sean made, that it is your response to your environment, even more so than the environment itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so with these toes, it's kind of like we take a look at some of the areas that, I shouldn't say toes, I should say feet, some of the areas that we're actually drawn to immediately. And you might notice yourself drawn to, there's quite a lot of crisscross lines. And this area represents the digestive system, but it also represents the solar plex region. And it can contain, when it's crisscrossed, a lot of worry. So this is what we're seeing in these feet. Outside of that, beautiful feet, but the worrying pattern may not be seen in all parts of the person's face and body, but we see it very clearly here. So sometimes the worry may not present in a way that others are allowed to see it, but the internal body response is still showing us that it's a very strong presence. And it's particularly more so on the left foot than the right. So again, that indicates not necessarily showing it to the world as much as what she is in terms of experiencing that internally on the left. Sorry, Christy, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, you're good, Linda. Just to add to that, this person may experience where Linda's talking about the lines being in the digestive system. When there tends to be worry, sometimes people can develop over time colitis. They can develop constipation or regular diarrhea, issues around digesting food. And we're really talking about one that digests, we all digest life. How is that happening? There's a little bit of worry internally around that piece. What is that tendency for this one? How might that be showing up? And that would be the dialogue that I would ask, is about the digestive system based on the lines and the tension in the solar plexus area, which is the digestive system.
So how we perceive life before we take it in, and our ability to be able to offer back to life what we desire. Yeah. These are very heavy feet, aren't they? They look heavy even when you visually acknowledge them. Yes, they look like they're not just magnetized to the earth, they look like lead weights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Somebody who finds movement challenging. Yeah, to be moved or to allow themselves to move. Yeah, there's become a habit of staying put rather than creating action, which only tells us more about the history and how challenging action was for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how we relate to life is how we've experienced life, and yet the activity of living is also to recognize that life is not only how we have experienced it, but also how it can exist.
Christy, do you want to do this one?
Yeah. So as we look at this foot, we see, we start at the base, which is the heel. We see a little bit of dryness. You can see the yellowish dryness, dry skin on the heel. And the arch is fairly high. It does look like there's some tension in the arch, which means there may be a little tension in the belly. And moving up the foot, a little bit of dryness again underneath that bone with the little redness, and along the toe. So that foot it's riding on the inside a little bit more so than the outside. And that's what can create a bunion, is that the imbalance on the foot of having the weight more rotated internally versus externally. And that you will also see in the ankles, which we're not looking at yet, and up into the body of the structure of the body. And when we see quite a few veins that are coming out around the heel. And that's a tendency, not always, a tendency to overthink sometimes. Doesn't mean all the time. The feet hold present time in the past. So I would say the tendency here for this person can be to overthink and be in the mind, and also be a little bit like an inner critic happening more so, and rough on themselves. That's what I see when I see these feet. They're not giving themselves as much compassion as they give other people. I need to do it this way and I need to do it well. And that's that determined energy in this foot. And I would encourage this person to also be very gentle in that determination as well. So on the feminine side, to offer up a little more grace internally. So there's a little more softness in how their internal programming is running.
And combined with that, we see the big toe goes up in the ear. So that also speaks of high expectations, which have absolutely no doubt served this person incredibly well. But then there's also the learning of acknowledging, and very much in line with what Christy said, to do that really pat on the back and reflection of how much this person has actually achieved, because these feet are very much achievers' feet. You know, there's a lot of doing, and the invitation to come back into more of that, the gentle nature, is definitely presenting. Okay, I'm just going to stop the share here. We do have other photos which we had to go through, but we're also wanting to invite you to offer some Q&A. So if Christy and Sean, if you guys are okay with that, I think maybe the Q&A would be a good place to start with.
Sure.
So before we start the Q&A, when we teach feet reading, it's not just about learning how to read another person's feet. It is very much a self-development and taking a look at your own feet. So whoever is in the class, we're looking at your feet whilst learning about other people's feet. And it's the same thing with hands or face. When you start to recognize the gifts of some of the things that you've experienced that may have been a challenge, you can actually start to relate to yourself and others differently. So you might notice like your partner or a friend has really chunky feet, or very, very different looking feet to yours. And it's like, that person processes differently to me. I actually don't need to be offended by that person, because that person is, as an example, practical, lots of common sense, lacking a little bit of sensitivity. And when you see that show up in 1 or 2 or 3 different places, then it's like, okay, so I'm feeling this way because I am super sensitive, and that person may lack a little bit of sensitivity, but are really great as common practicality. So this is where it's both self-development as well as learning to recognize other people's patterns.
The patterns of being human.
Mm-hmm.
And how that's being embedded, and how we experience each of those elements.
So we know that Cynthia's got some questions. Before we go to Cynthia, does anyone else have any questions that has come up from what we have discussed so far, or your own feet?
I would like to ask something. I have a big bunion on my right foot, and I can't seem to get rid of it. And my big toe is heading south more than it has been. I don't know what bunions mean.
Got it.
Maybe you could help me with that.
Yeah. So bunions are that strip of the foot, the ball of the foot, and at the top of the foot, just under the toes, is all relative to heart.
Heart.
Heart?
Heart.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Mm.
and when we look at the combination of heart being emotion, emotion being tissue, and we see the development of bone or the overdevelopment of bone, then we're seeing the mind overriding the heart. So the logic of the mind is often overriding the emotional nature of how we feel.
Okay.
Yeah, you may tend to do what is right rather than how you feel.
Wow. I like that.
So it's,
Thank you.
yeah, so it's that the bone itself is the strength of the mind. Yeah. When you feel the intelligence override the deeper emotion of who you are. And that's when you're getting that overriding experience.
Okay.
Yeah. The medical model is sensational. They have all of these wonderful experiences to be able to correct and realign, understanding that in having the realignment, that also in itself gives you an opportunity to reset how you've been.
Okay.
Yeah. So that heart
Thank you.
space can resume its position, its rightful position.
Okay.
And that can
Thank you.
create also, Vicky, a huge amount of pain, right? As you work with that area and touch it and massage it. So as you're doing some gentle massaging with it, to connect in with also the pain that's in that area. Allow yourself to drop into the feeling side of what's actually underneath that strong protective mind, because the body takes on defensive patterns and protective patterns to serve you well. Yeah, but we need to start to take a look at the patterns of what's not serving well to invite in a different experience.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. Beautiful.
I like that.
Beautiful question.
Thanks to a few people who have just joined. We did actually start an hour ago, so apologies if there's any confusion on the time. So we're coming towards the end, but what we've done is we've actually invited any questions on feet. So if you guys have got any questions on feet, please feel free to ask them, and we will be sending you the recording as well. And nice to see you here. Okay.
Now, could I just ask about the curling over of toes? It's probably fairly obvious. The last 3 toes, yeah, that have a curve over.
And is the curve over as if you're standing on a branch, they're curving over?
Yes, a little bit uplifted, you mean?
So I'm just, your description, Jackie, and just making sure that the conversation's correct. When you say curve over, is the curve over forwards or is the curve over to the right? Is it pushing outwards, forwards? Which way is it curving?
Yeah, pushing outwards a bit, and the head of the toe curved round to the floor, so it's not as visible.
Got it. Right. So in my understanding, the bigger toe, there's an acronym for toes. It's called TRACS: thinking, relating, ambition, communication, and social. And when we see people still turning up, when we see the bigger toe pushing down, then that's also an enforcement, but it's kind of like as we've seen the ostrich, as it disappears in the sand, it puts its head in the sand. The tip of the toe has this directive. If you think of it as a laser light, the tip of the toe is needing to see straight forward. But if it's looking down, it's only looking short term rather than further in its future. It's only looking at the immediate. So there's a pulling away from growing into the future or looking into the future. When the toes themselves splayed or turn away from looking forward, then there's also apprehension that lives there. Because as they pull away, they're pulling back towards behind me rather than joining in or looking into life or through to life.
And Jackie, think of it as well with, if you had your hands open, yeah? Think of what emotions would create you to go. Yeah, because the same response that's happening in the feet is a full body response. So as we're looking at that coming in, we're looking at not feeling as comfortable. Our body's alerting us to be a little bit more on guard. Something's occurring, and in that moment, you're not feeling quite as safe. So what we are doing always in psychosomatics, we're looking at the difference between in the moment to now a habitual pattern where that is now a locked in experience. Christy, do you want to add anything further to that?
Yeah, I want to bring in the opposite of that. So you have the holding on of the toes, the holding on of the branch. You explained that beautifully, Jackie. There's a grasping over a period of time that creates that. And the opposite of that can be the bringing the toes up. There's the grasping, holding on, and also the bringing the toes up is a tendency of going into the mind versus staying in the body. There's a holding on and let me get out of here. I want to go in my head and not feel. So it can be one or the other. Both are very similar. So what I would encourage all of you to do is begin to notice what do your toes do when you're overthinking, when you might get a little anxious, when even if you think about, you could do it today when we get off, there's something that upsets you. What do you notice that your toes do? Because your toes are explaining to you what's happening internally. And as we bring awareness to it, so Jackie, for you, what I would suggest is to begin to massage in between the toes and underneath the neck of the toe, because those toes have created so much tension through the years, probably, that they're very tense and tender. And as you begin to open the toe and relax and become familiar with your toes and what they're doing, you actually begin to create a relationship in a different way with yourself, that all of that is all right. And it can be a little bit easier as we are gentle with how we recognize the patterns, but also how we can begin to move through in a different way. Can you let go of the branch? Yes, you can, but it takes awareness to actually know we're holding on to the branch. And it takes time to understand that and to get the body's a heavier, more dense space, and it takes a while for the body to change the pattern, and it can change. But patience is part of this experience too, and not to make it go away right now because it can't. And you can bring that little bit of grace to, okay, this was the pattern of holding on really tightly, gently massaging them. I can create some softness internally in me.
Limbering.
Limbering.
Yes, the limbering.
Our thoughts.
So there's movement, the full movement, articulation of the toes and the feet. Yeah, the movement between the bone and the tissue. The bone and the tissue know naturally how to relate to each other. It's how we reside within it. that maximizes the experience.
Sean, can I ask if the little toe on your foot is sort of bent under the next toe?
Yeah, it overrides. Yeah, it
Goes
sits.
underneath. So
Yeah.
you can't see the nail on it. Yeah, like that, exactly
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Is that seen as a grasping, a holding, like a fear pattern, or is that something
Yeah,
else?
it's also a protection as well. Because the social toe, the small toe, is very much the experiences that have occurred within our family experience. And we see the communication toe protecting that.
Mm.
So when that smaller toe is protected by communication, then that person resides very strongly in their language. They rely on their language to protect them. Yeah, they're somebody that most certainly appreciates when somebody honors their word, and at the same time, when they speak for themselves, they really appreciate it when people interact. Some people, you might talk to them and they don't always hear what you say and continue on. And that's when we have to take more action. And that's when that little toe would be like, oh, we have to step up differently. Yeah, we have to come out from being hidden from behind our words and show ourselves.
And Trish, the flip side to that is as well, the little toe going up in the air. So it doesn't actually touch the ground at all. And still being the social family toe, it also tells us the relationship. So different style of expression, but the same style of thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
And what's magnificent about being able to identify history is that it shows us your self-relating experience. Yeah, your life is relative to you, not to us. Who you need to become on your behalf is very different to how I need to be on my behalf. But we have all the same elements. But our experience of those elements has been different. Good question, thanks.
Any more?
Welcome to people who have shown up along the way here today. We did start just over an hour ago. So the recording will be sent to you, of course, because you've been part of the registration. So just so you're aware that we're inside of a Q&A at the end of the experience of explaining feet.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Or are we on to something?
Yes, just a quick question. I've noticed that a lot of Asian people don't have curved toes, but straight. So I always thought this has something to do if you have curved toes or toes moving in. Is the shoes that we were brought up to wear. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just waiting for the question to finish. Yeah, most certainly.
That's it. I just wondered whether it has a lot to do with the shoes we were brought up to wear that caused feet to go in, caused bunions, caused lots of different awful issues, because in Asian countries it's quite warm. They tend to wear slippers or sandals and they don't tend to squash their toes. Now, I don't know whether that has anything to do with it, but anyway, I'm just interested to get your opinion, that's all.
You will notice some cultural differences between how people experience their toes. Yes, sometimes shoes can be a restriction, but we still see in all cultures the things that we see in the toes and what toes do. We see that across the board. But where community is different and family is different, which you sometimes see in a lot of the Asian cultures, that family support also means as a community that sometimes the people come into the world feeling a little bit more community focused and supported by families. And you see that with people that have generations of, you know, their grandparents living in close proximity. So I think we would take it firstly as we would read it as what we see rather than the shoes. There might be other patterns that would show up as shoes that we would notice throughout the body. Christy, you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I would agree, Linda, because I have seen, yeah, it doesn't matter what culture someone comes from in that pattern of how the feet are either grasping or long. It is the internal patterns. And yes, culture changes that, and everyone is still human and experiencing life. And it does show up in the feet, regardless of where we come from, in similar ways. So anxiety will show up the same way in feet across the board. I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
And our humanness is still the same.
Yeah. And whether the shoe orientation is a representation also of the environment in which that individual experienced life. Thanks, Maria.
Yeah, well,
Hey, Lou.
that's what I was going to say, but I remember women, or even men actually, when shoes became long and thin in the front, that caused a lot of issues. And yeah, I think also changed feet. And I understand, sure, internal feelings always show up in the body. I understand that as well.
Yeah.
But
society has its influences, right? Same with stilettos and
yeah,
you know, the where we reside within society has its undercurrent of experience and engagement, and that changes our habits as well.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen a lot of Asian feet, and I've never seen curved feet.
Yeah, right.
Squashed feet, because
the spread.
they're always straight, really nice. I've always admired them.
Yeah.
And it's because the weather's warm and they wear slip-ons or sandals. So
yeah, there's a lot more personal freedom.
well, the weather. I take it down to the weather, that if the weather's nice and warm, yeah, you're not going to wear, well, that's not really true, but yeah, slippers are more comfortable. So anyway, that I just wondered whether that had anything to do with it. Thank you
Maria.
anyway.
Really appreciate your question.
Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, Maria. Hey, Lou.
Hello, Lou. Welcome.
Hi, good to see you all. I want to give a bit of background to my question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Whenever I come on, I ask a question about something to do with family and how, what sicknesses they've got and how they've passed. And, you know, it might just simply be that I'm so close that despite my training, I don't always pick things up. But I'm about to come to Australia on Monday from Washington here to care for my stepmom who has bowel cancer. And she has all kinds of body issues. And the last time I worked on her feet, she had really quite serious, well, she called it toe fungus. It's some kind of issue she has with the nails. And it may have been because of also going to a podiatrist or someone that has used it on a lot of nails and there's been some transference of infection. I don't know. But again, as it's kind of like come out of the blue. She only had a colonoscopy last week and is scheduled for surgery, and she's in her 80s. And I found that working on her feet was for her comfort, but there's still like, are there some links that because I'm so close to a family tie that
Lou, if I could give you,
I could learn from? That would be great. Thanks, Linda.
if I can give you some suggestions of things to look at. When we were talking about the process of detoxification, and the big toe represents the mind, and it can be present in all toes, not just the mind, but the big toe represents the mind. So quite often when we see a turbulence in the nail and what's underneath it, we need to take a look at the attitudes that a person may ruminate over, but also hold on to.
Yeah.
And it's part of like not necessarily letting go of the history and the story, even if the person is not consciously aware of that they're doing it on a daily basis. It's like part of that. I'm just going to shut that past out that I was talking about before. So we shut it out without actually dealing with some of the underlying issues. And if you were to go into the emotional side of the underlying issues, you would find that it's a little bit like swampy, that encourages an attitude of, it's a feeling of stuckness, it's a feeling of not being able to get through it. There's not so much clarity. And so that will show up in the history of the nails itself. So part of it is learning how to let go and to not see the past as completely as the horrendous things that can happen to people, but to also understand the growth that they have. And it's a journey. You know, it's not just an easy fix. It's a journey of inner exploration that is individual to each person.
Yeah.
And I would say, Lou, with that, the most beautiful gift you can give someone that you're going over to take care of her in her 80s is the witnessing of the experience.
Right.
And the love that is given towards that at this point in her life is what matters. And consciously, I think a conscious witness without needing to change or fix is the gift.
Right. Yes.
And that's enough.
Thank you.
That's enough. And it's a beautiful gift.
Yes.
And she's having the experience of letting go of something that's been deeply embedded.
Yeah.
Yes.
In one way or another, however that transpires for them.
I'm very lucky. I did live with her for nearly 34 years. And there is a large amount that I could guess at the blanks, but as you were saying, Christy, really just to witness her unfolding.
Yeah.
It's a privilege to be trusted. My concern is making her having her comfortable, and I have to let go of that because whether she ends up passing her admissions process for an operation or whether she is in for the slow haul with spread of the cancer, either way there's a process that's just perfect for her in terms of, you know, like if you've got issues of control, you're gonna find yourself in a lot of spaces before you pass on where control is fully, you know, taken from you, so that you don't have that ability to hold on. So thank you for just that. You know, there was the either the connection between how she is with her feet and, you know, the more recent manifestation of the bowel cancer, given that my father only passed away September last year. And a lot of the times when I speak, I don't always give the background, and I know we don't have time for everyone to give all the background, but it was really useful to see that in itself is the gift that, you know, and I don't
and being loved, being loved and being held, being witnessed.
Right. Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone.
Hi,
Thank you, Lou.
Cynthia.
Yeah, just while we're still talking with Louise's topic, Can you add, because I'm curious about her story with the woman that she's working with. She mentioned about the fungus and cancer. Can either of those show up as you're describing the feet?
Okay, so she was discussing how her stepmother has bowel cancer, and that the toes have shown up with fungus. So the toenail is the receptor, and when we see it as the receptor, it's the antenna. So it's listening out for particular information. And when that information comes in and it meets with the fungus, then it's being converted or translated into something in a negative manner, in a negative way, rather than an open, healthy way.
Okay.
So
Thank
we're
you.
seeing how somebody perceives or receives information.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. What were you talking about earlier in the session with regards to your feet and the things that you've noticed?
In my feet?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for remembering. When I first started psychosomatics in 2007, my feet were very practical, down to earth. My big toe headlight was straight forward. And now it's up like this. With the education, I have aspired to be more than I once was. And I appreciate this education over all those years, and listening to you all with your questions and answers. A lot of them have been answered, and I've gained even more information today. What I'd like to share is what you did say is, my husband's toes are long. My 3 sons have got long toes, and other people have commented today. Now my nature is to be short and guarded. And now as my sons are growing, they've got long toes, but now they're curling in like mine. So it's just genetics. But it's like you're saying about attitudes, that genetically they were born one way, yet they've adopted the attitudes of their environment. And now I'm equally seeing that in my grandchildren. So this is the gift of this education, that even the bunion story today, I saw a bunion in my mom's foot. Because I've got the awareness now, I'm mentally not doing any techniques, but mentally thinking for myself rather than thinking so much about other people. So this work is so amazing, and I'm very grateful for you hosting these forums, because it really is. It is very much important for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Yeah. And the remarkable ability to change. I myself, over the decades, have, with face splits, things like that, witnessed my own changes across time, and especially in my feet. And my point of self-change and requirement of change was when I noticed my dad's feet about 30 years ago. I looked at his feet and I went, I'm not sure I want that to be my future. And that's when I went, right, I'm going to learn how to occupy my feet appropriately.
Yes.
Rather than embed wild habits that distort my physique. Yes.
Can I
That's
ask
a lot of what we're talking about? Is seeing the patterns and shifting the patterns, because that can be done. Our bodies change as quickly as we begin to notice them.
Yeah.
Can I please ask a quick question?
Sure.
What about ingrown toenails?
Oh, very good. Linda, do you want to take this?
So ingrown toenails usually represent a cutting edge of self-talk. So there can be that inner critic that can sometimes find fault at things that you do or don't do, rather than enjoyment with the things that you do. So I would say the perception can sometimes be inward focused, and the dialogue can sometimes not be as friendly as what it could be, or as gentle or as kind. And the things that would be invited to be looking at would be, how would you recognize if your internal dialogue is supporting you? Would you say your commentary to your best friend or someone you loved? And just to start to notice if that commentary is different.
Is it helpful?
Sometimes it's helpful to say it out loud to someone who can hear it so you can get out of your own head and then have a discussion around that, because sometimes there's so much fear about, well, they'll judge me if I say this, they'll think this, and the outward focus continues to just keep ruminating. And to have someone to ask, I keep thinking about this, and to have a discussion or just a witnessing of that begins to matter and take out the hiding ingrown into the toe, into a space of light, into a different way to experience that inner voice that I think we naturally in the beginning tend to hide from because we don't want to be judged or we have shame around it.
Yeah, to
and
air it.
It needs to air it, yes, because the toe digs into the flesh. So to have someone that you could talk to around that would be very helpful to begin to break that pattern. Good question.
Okay,
So does changing what you've been talking about change the physical aspects of your toes then with ingrown toenails?
You change the behavior, you
Yes.
change the mechanism, it also changes physically.
Yes.
So when you make changes mentally, emotionally, and physically, you automatically have physical change.
I was interested in, not sure, Marion, I think, I'm not sure if she asked a question about fungus. You mentioned fungus in the toes have to do with an indication of cancer. Did I understand that correctly or not?
No, there's a parallel between what's occurring for Lou's stepmother and the fungus on the toes isn't a representation of the cancer. It's a representation of how somebody perceives and receives information. The cancer itself is indicative in the body of where they're storing something that's that feels negative to them. So in this circumstance, it's being stored in the bowel, and therefore this lady is having challenges around letting go and letting life. So rather than see them as two things that relate to each other, they are symptoms that are existing on the same person, but one has not been the catalyst of another.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Go for it, Linda.
No, I was just saying, I guess we've been going for an hour and a half, so we've come to the end of our session, and we'd like to thank you for joining us live. It's really appreciated, so we can get direct Q&A and feedback. So I know that there's a lot of people that are choosing to listen to the recordings. We thank you for being with us as well, and we look forward to seeing you at next month's topic. Feel free to send in to us if you've got some specific topics that you would you also like to have tabled, so we can consider that. But in the meantime, we wish you all well, and we look forward to seeing you, if not before. We look forward to seeing some of you before, but we look forward to seeing you again next month on the Psychosomatic Conversations, and we'll send you out the details.
Take care of your beautiful
Thank
feet.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.